I believe the Logos Party is both the party before there were parties and the party that founded the United States. According to the history books, in May of 1787, 4 years after the signing of the Treaty of Paris officially ended the Revolutionary War, the colonies sent 55 delegates to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Initially, the goal was to revise the Articles of Confederation, but it was soon decided that instead an entirely new government should be created. With General Washington serving as the convention's president, those 55 delegates brought their biases, different political ideologies, state loyalties, jealousies, and selfish interests into the assembly room at Independence Hall. Among those 55 delegates, I think every political ideology was probably in some way represented. Far left, left center, centrist, right center, far right, and maybe even a sixth category for people whose political worldview contains beliefs from the left, right, and center. In the midst of all those different competing political ideologies, I believe there was another idea that was also brought into the assembly room: reason. On September 17, 1787, the final day of the convention, with the Constitution completed and about to be voted on, Benjamin Franklin, the oldest delegate at 81, delivered a speech trying to persuade those delegates who were dissatisfied with the Constitution to sign it. Because of poor health, Franklin had a fellow delegate from Pennsylvania, James Wilson, read his speech. The beginning of the speech reads: Mr. President, I confess that there are several parts of this Constitution which I do not at present approve, but I am not sure I shall never approve them, for having lived long, I have experienced many instances of being obliged by better information or fuller consideration to change opinions even on important subjects, which I once thought right, but found to be otherwise. It is therefore that the older I grow, the more apt I am to doubt my own judgment and to pay more respect to the judgment of others. Later in the speech Franklin wrote: I doubt too whether any other convention we can obtain may be able to make a better constitution. For when you assemble a number of men to have the advantage of their joint wisdom, you inevitably assemble with those men all their prejudices, their passions, their errors of opinion, their local interests, and their selfish views. From such an assembly can a perfect production be expected? It therefore astonishes me, sir, to find this system approaching so near to perfection as it does, and I think it will astonish our enemies, who are waiting with confidence to hear that our counsels are confounded like those of the builders of Babel. Thus I consent, sir, to this Constitution because I expect no better, and because I am not sure that it is not the best. Franklin closed the speech by saying: On the whole, sir, I cannot help expressing a wish that every member of the convention who may still have objections to it would with me on this occasion doubt a little of his own infallibility, and to make manifest our unanimity, put his name to this instrument. I think Franklin was saying that the Constitution was a document he still had disagreements with, but with further reflection and new information he may some day agree with all of it because his worldview, even at age 81, was still a work in progress. I could be wrong, but I believe Franklin was reminding all of the delegates that yes, it was important for each of them to bring all of their different and competing political convictions to the Constitutional Convention, so that, as he said, they could take advantage of their joint wisdom. But it was not feasible for any one person to obtain everything they wanted in the Constitution, so each of them should have checked dogma at the door so that they could step into the assembly room onto the same foundation of reason that would hold them all intellectually accountable, so that they could concede that someone else might have a better idea and be willing to compromise for the general good of the country. Franklin probably convinced some of the skeptics, but to his displeasure only 39 of the 55 delegates signed the Constitution. One of the main reasons some did not sign it was because it lacked a Bill of Rights, which was fortunately added later. Regardless of how many delegates signed, I believe the Constitutional Convention was a good representation of what the Logos Party tries to embody. The Logos Party does not endorse a particular political platform that all members are expected to believe in. Instead, it endorses a standard of reason which, 1, fosters a culture of intellectual diversity that allows into the party opinions across the full political spectrum, and 2, mandates that each member checks dogma at the door so that they enter the party onto the same foundation of reason that holds them all intellectually accountable, so that each member sees their worldview, like Franklin, as a work that is always in progress. They admit they could be wrong, they challenge their own views, and they welcome others challenging their beliefs. In short, the Logos Party allows in conviction, passion, and a diversity of ideas onto its foundation of reason, but not dogma. I think that was also the goal of the Constitutional Convention. The Constitutional Convention took place during a time before political parties. Shortly after the Constitution took effect in 1789, the first political party was formed. Created by Alexander Hamilton and John Adams, it was called the Federalists and supported a strong central government. Then, in 1792, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison founded the Democratic Republican Party, which advocated against a strong central government. By 1796, the bitter rivalry between these two parties had essentially monopolized the politics of every state, each even having their own propaganda newspapers. Though neither party would survive in their original form, they established the system of two dominant and mostly dogmatic parties competing against one another that has persisted until the present day. I believe that if a two-party system similar to the one the United States currently has and has had for almost its entire history had existed before and during the Constitutional Convention, the Constitution probably would have never been created and approved, and the United States of America would never have been founded. Fortunately, when the delegates came to Philadelphia in 1787, a majority of them checked dogma at the door long enough to allow reason to guide them as they turned Independence Hall into a laboratory of ideas where they debated and tested all of their different opinions and then made mutual compromises to find common ground for the sake of creating a constitution unlike anything the world had ever seen before. Then, with his final speech, Ben Franklin immortalized the convention's spirit of intellectual diversity, reason, and compromise. Like the Constitutional Convention, the goal of the Logos Party is to be a laboratory where old, current, and new ideas across the political spectrum can be tested so that everyone's differences can be used towards the same goals of truth and progress, with each member at peace with the idea that many of their views could be casualties on that path because every member's goal is truth and not their opinion of the truth. Even though there was no official political party represented at the Constitutional Convention, the 55 delegates acted together almost as if they were one party, a party committed to reason, diversity of opinions, and mutual compromise. It was as if they were the Logos Party. That is why I call the Logos Party the party before there were parties, and the party that founded the United States. If nothing else, I think the Logos Party is at least the party of Benjamin Franklin. While the delegates were signing the Constitution, Franklin watched the president's chair at the front of the hall that Washington had sat in throughout the convention. A sun split by the horizon was carved and painted on the back of the chair. Franklin told some of the members near him that during the convention he had often looked at the painted sun and wondered whether it was rising or setting, but now at length I have the happiness to know that it is a rising and not a setting sun. Today I think Franklin might again wonder whether the sun is setting or rising, and to assure it is still rising, declare that we should rededicate to the principles that guided the Constitutional Convention, the principles embodied in the Logos Party.